Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bassam Haddad, and I am joined again by Shir Hever, addressing Israel's zombie economy. This is the last part, unfortunately, of our coverage of this important topic. And this event is organized by Jadaliyya and co sponsored by the Gaza and Context Collaborative Project and by Mondoweiss, a remarkable publication that everyone should check out. Shir, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, Bassam.
Always very happy to have you, and I kind of hope that like I was hoping that this will not be the last episode because I've been enjoying these conversations quite a bit, and quite a bit of people have actually been as well, because there's really not very much on this topic as opposed to so many other topics that we discuss. So I'm happy to have you. We are discussing today the disinformation bubble, which is a huge topic given that so much of what's out there um, is either not accurate or deliberately deceptive. So at the same time that we are also talking about the situation inside Israel. So I'm very happy we are doing this. Before we start, is there anything else you'd like to say about any of the previous episodes? Anything you'd like to share in terms of notes or commentary about what we have done so far? And I'll refresh your and everyone else's memory by sharing that the first event was titled The War Currency. The second was titled The Counter Revolution of the Israeli Arms Industry. The third was Israel's Breakdown into Tribes. And the fourth one was Israel's economy on the verge, is Israel's economy on the verge of collapse? And we are addressing the finale today, the disinformation bubble. So, anything on your part before we start?
I think that all these five episodes together form a kind of narrative, which under this big title of Israel's zombie economy, and it is something, to the best of my knowledge, which is true as a description of the events as they are right now. But I hope that in the future we will have another conversation, and as the reality progresses, we can talk about something about these developments, and I hope that we will no longer see a zombie situation.
Sorry, I think I was muted. I was saying absolutely, at least not in the real world, and so on. So, yes, we are. Just to make sure everybody understands that this is October 30th, so people will watch this a bit later, because in the other events, during the other events, I also neglected to mention when it was recorded, because some of the things we said were like somewhat dated. But this is really beyond current events. All right, so let's start by the first question, which is a softball, if you will. So here, a lot of Israelis and supporters of Israel, but specifically a lot of Israelis who are in the opposition, blame Netanyahu personally and claim that if he is replaced, Israel will be back on the right path in various regards. Um, I know the answer is easy, but can Israel's genocide be blamed on one person? And given that so many of us know that the answer is no, why this insistence, or if you can unpack this insistence that, oh, this is a Netanyahu issue? And this is not just in Israel. I mean, even in my quarters in the United States, in Washington, D.C., people I know, people I connect with, sometimes colleagues, um, and some of the left wing, I say left wing, even in, you know, in global terms, not just American terms, because in American terms, left wing is center. But even in global terms, the left wing, some left wing conversation podcasts in the United States, maybe to protect themselves, also reference Netanyahu or this government, right? So it's even more open minded, but it's still confining the issues, the problems to this government. So if you can unpack this for us as a starting point, please.
Yeah, I don't think it's a softball question at all, and I don't think that the answer is such a clear no as you present it. That's part of the trap, because of course it is an excuse. It is an excuse that the, liberal Zionists are using to say actually the state of Israel is fine, and even pretend that Israel is a democracy, and only one man is the problem. And of course, that's not the issue, because Zionism has been a colonial movement from its beginning. And of course, Israel is an apartheid state, and it was an apartheid state long before Netanyahu. But it's so easy to underestimate how powerful this man is and how intelligent he is. And his motivation, as far as one can estimate based on his actions, is not ideological. Unlike many of the leaders of Zionism and of the state of Israel over the years, Netanyahu is mainly egotistical and power hungry, and working constantly to cement his own position of power. And in the process, he has undermined the strategy of the liberal Zionism, which was a strategy that was a strategy of repression, domination, exploitation of the indigenous Palestinian population. But it was a sustainable strategy. And this is an important point. This is not a defense of the strategy, of course, but it was clever, at least in as much as it was very difficult for Palestinians to resist and fight for their rights when Israel was able to gather international support and to continue to maintain a facade as if there is democracy, and as if the occupation is temporary, and as if Palestinian citizens in Israel have equal rights, and all these lies. And Netanyahu has completely undermined the strategy. And this is also one of the reasons that those liberal Zionists are accusing him of destroying the whole project, and bringing the state of Israel into a verge of collapse. But it's, I think, much deeper than this, because Netanyahu is a mastermind when it comes to manipulating emotions and the perception of reality. Everyone knows that he's a liar, a compulsive liar even. But his lies are very complicated, and his lies are very strategic. So I want to give just the example of his speech at the UN in September 26, where he gave a speech basically to an empty room, because most of the world's diplomats left the room in protest. And it's a speech that, even though it is very unpleasant to listen to it, or to read it, I think it's worthwhile to understand why Netanyahu gave this speech and filled it with such obvious lies. Speaking about babies that were burnt alive on October 7, and we know it's not true. He mentioned a Holocaust survivor in Colorado that was burned to death by anti-Semites, which is also not true. So why was he lying so obviously? And I think this is part of the point, that for the millions of Israelis who are in a state of limbo and in a state of disinformation, and on some level they know that Israel is committing genocide, and that Israel has and is committing atrocities beyond description, and those there is no way to continue to say that they hold on to values of humanity, and things like this. They know that Israel is intentionally starving people to death, but they need desperately to tell the world, but mostly to tell themselves, that no, everything is fine. Israel is allowing enough food to get into Gaza. These kind of lies, and their way to do so is to say, oh, but Netanyahu said that Israel is bringing enough food into Gaza. So they know he's lying, but they'd rather not admit that they know that he's lying, because this lie, it protects themselves from emotional collapse, and it's such an important lie for them. And so Netanyahu, by giving the speech, as he's doing in so many other cases, he is making himself indispensable to the Israeli public. And it becomes impossible to replace him, because nobody can take his place. And you mentioned that it's his government and not just himself, which is to some extent true. But those kahanists, far right, genocidal members, really fascist members of his government, they belong to an organization that was outlawed by the Likud party, his own party. And Netanyahu is the one who reversed that decision. He decided to reverse the fact that this party is outlawed and bring these people into his government and legitimize them. And he broke apart all these safeguards that the liberal Zionists put into place in order to make Zionism a sustainable form of domination. And of course, when you take a sustainable system of long-term colonial repression and exploitation, and you break it apart just based on very short-term strategy of gaining power, the result is catastrophic. And the result is that Netanyahu was willing to incite the whole public to commit genocide. He used the term Amalek. He called on revenge, and this kind of language is what made it possible to mobilize a whole society to commit genocide. And we have to acknowledge that. So, of course, not all the blame is on his shoulders, but the reason that Israel did not commit genocide before October 2023 is because they didn't want to destroy their own country. Because it's not out of respect for Palestinian lives, it's because they preferred to keep a system of occupation and apartheid. And by crossing this red line and committing genocide, Israel has become an unsustainable project, but it's an unsustainable project in which Netanyahu is still firmly in power.
Thanks, Shir. I'm assuming that when we say that in the past a genocide was not committed, besides some differences in how we approached it a couple of episodes ago in terms of whether it was a slow motion type of elimination slash genocide in the past or not, the caveat is, an attack like October 11th, October 7th, an attack like October 7th didn't occur in previous times with the intensity. That's one caveat. The other thing is that I'm glad that there is one thing we disagree on, which is whether this was a softball question, because otherwise, it seems like that we're colluding together. So this is a good thing. So it's a collusion proof approach now. So I understand what you're sharing, but keep in mind that the narrative that it's not basically the foundations of Israel and the Israeli government. This narrative is what people refer to when they assume that this is not a tough question, right? The fact that Netanyahu takes things beyond a particular threshold, just like people can say about Trump in the United States. It's not like United States without Trump is all fine and dandy. But I do appreciate the nuance, and this is what I wanted you to do, to unpack some of these mechanics, including the very, very poignant remark about how sometimes you would like to hide behind your opponent, the political opponent within Israel, which is Netanyahu. Israelis would like to hide behind some of his claims in order to feel better about their positions. Because after all, correct me if I'm wrong, anywhere between 75 to 85 of Israeli Jews are supportive of quite a bit of what has been happening, and some are actually, or in the past have said that Israel has not gone far enough. We're talking about a small percentage, like 3 to 6% or something of the sort, sometimes more. But I don't hear these numbers as much anymore, or these kinds of polls. But the poll about 82%, I think, is significant, and I'm happy that we're talking about this information, because I think this will address it. But before we go on, can you tell us a little bit about what kind of approach or methodology can discern what knowledge is available and what isn't available to the Israeli public? We talked about this last time, and we talked about the access of Israelis to the internet and to sources of knowledge is pretty much over the above average, globally speaking. But you had shared that in any place in the world, even when that is the case, people don't know some of the specifics. So In that vein, what methodology can we pursue to see what's available and what's not?
Yeah, maybe a good place to start is the criticism that I sometimes receive, especially from Zionists, that my claim about the Israeli zombie economy and the imminent collapse of the Israeli economy are detached from reality, because look, Israel's stock exchange is increased through some part of the last 2 years, especially more recently, and the Israeli currency has been more or less stable. It had some ups and downs, mostly downs, but still hasn't completely lost its value. And there are still a lot of Israelis who are working, and so they must think that there is some kind of continuity to the economy. And this is really a methodological problem that cannot be solved with just material numbers. It's not. Maybe Marxists can do it, but I cannot, and I would also argue that it's not really possible to say that the economy is based just on the moving of materials. It's also based on people's faith in the economy and the way that the system is able to reproduce itself. And what makes it possible for Israel to move forward is this delusion. And then how do I prove it? It's very difficult to prove. And of course we can always break it down into a lot of specific cases, and to say, okay, here's the claim that there were 40 babies that were beheaded on October 7. Here's every Israeli media channel, including the liberal ones like Haaretz, reported it multiple times, and none of them then proceeded to refute that claim and apologize for it. Or maybe they did in a very, very small and like by the way kind of statement, when they were actually talking about some article from the international media that already refuted those claims, and then they had no choice but to announce it. So this is something that we can go one by one and show these acts of these lies, or these false assumptions about reality. But still, we are facing the first live stream genocide in the world. And of course, there is a lot of false information coming from every side. So it's not just the Israelis that are spreading lies. Of course, Palestinian resistance groups have every reason also to disseminate false information as part of their fighting tactics, as any guerrilla organization would do. And so it is to be expected that there will be a lot of misconceptions and surprises and false understandings. But I think there is something very essential and deep here, and this is really the methodological problem. I want to refer to the poll that you mentioned, because, of course, during war and in a moment in which people are swept up by this incitement, the poll doesn't really tell us much about Israeli worldview. It tells us much about the current feeling of Israelis. And in this poll, they said 80%, more or less, I think it was 82, as you mentioned, who said that they support the complete deportation, or the emptying of all of Gaza from its Palestinian population. 82%. They didn't say they supported genocide, they supported a complete ethnic cleansing of Gaza. Then you had 60% in the same poll who said that actually Palestinians should also be removed from Israel. So those Palestinians who allegedly have Israeli citizenship, 60% of the Jewish population said actually they should have their citizenship revoked, and they should be ethnic cleansed as well. And then 40% of the Jewish population also said that they believe that the Israeli military should act in the Gaza Strip as according to biblical traditions. So here it's an obvious and clear call for genocide, because everyone who studies the Bible, and Jewish Israelis study the Bible in school from a very young age, knows exactly what biblical traditions mean, and what it really entails. So the same people who say we are aware that, or we support the idea that the military will commit those atrocities in Gaza. And we are also part of the population who is doing it, right? The soldiers are also answering the poll. These are also opinions among the soldiers who are in Gaza. And people know that on social media there are those soldiers who are documenting themselves committing these atrocities. And at the same time, they're saying, actually, we have no idea. And as far as we know, civilians are not targeted in Gaza. And as far as we know, there's enough food, and all of these claims. So people are saying at the same time two different things. And I think that the only way to understand it, and here we need to rely a lot on colonial theory or post-colonial theory, like, for example, uh, Stanley Cohen on the colonial gaze, that the way that colonial societies work, especially settler colonies, is by having this kind of dual consciousness. People believe contradicting things at the same time. And it's a kind of survival mechanism for people who live in a situation of deep injustice, but they don't want to admit to themselves that they live in a situation of deep injustice. So they have to constantly shift and say on the one hand, there's nothing wrong in Gaza. There is no genocide happening in Gaza. On the second, they would say, oh, but Palestinians deserve it, and we are right to do it. And then they would also say, but we had no idea that this was even happening. So this kind of split consciousness is actually the methodology. This is my answer to your question, that we need to use this post-colonial methodology of the colonial gaze, Stanley Cohen, to understand how people can hold on to contradictory beliefs at the same time. And you also mentioned Israelis' access to international media. And it's true that many Israelis can speak English, and of course, they can access a lot of international media very easily. But they choose not to. They choose not to because the emotional risk is too great. And when the genocide was still quite new, it was still in 2023, I think it was November, there was a sports correspondent from Haaretz, a sports correspondent in the sports section, who said, it's my job as a journalist, and he wrote it in his article in the sports section. It's my job as a journalist to report to you what's happening in sporting events around the world, like football and basketball and things like this. But and because of this, I have no choice but to read international newspapers. And I just want to make a comment here that Israelis live in a complete bubble and have no idea what's going on in the world. And I think this is the reality. It's a choice by Israelis, and it's not a choice by Netanyahu, to continue our conversation from the previous question, and to lie to themselves in order to live in this world as if things are okay and are going to be okay.
One of the things that I have to stop saying thank you. Every time I watch conversations, nobody says thank you when the guest answers. I keep saying thank you, and I was told that I shouldn't.
You're too polite.
I don't know if I'm too polite. It's just like, thanks for this, and for the effort, even if it's not always an agreement. But in this case, no, I really appreciate your comments. What struck me a little bit is when you said something that is not something I'm used to hearing in the United States regarding people not seeking out information, because the United States is notorious for people actually definitely not necessarily seeking international news, but even within the United States, the Fox News folks like will not watch CNN, and probably vice versa to an extent. But you said in Israel they choose not to. Like it's not that they decry it or reject the alternative. It's that you're saying they choose not to maintain sanity or to maintain composure or to maintain a narrative.
The difference is that in the US, if somebody says, I don't care what's happening in Syria, I'm not going to read about it, I'm not going to seek information because Syria is not important to me, that's one thing. But for Israelis who say, I am an expert, I know everything, and I'm going online on social media to fight with supporters of Palestine and call them anti-Semites and confront them with the real facts, and at the same time refuse to actually verify those facts. This is not exactly the same kind of misinformation.
I was saying, yeah, that's what's interesting, and quite interestingly, in the Arab world, I've been to, I mean, most. It's the exact opposite. Nobody watches the local news. I mean, small percentages in most Arab countries, at least, if not all. But they watch everything else. That says something that I actually discuss in the conversation on repression. All right, certain kinds of repression. All right, Shir, I'm going to go to another topic that actually mixes a lot of concepts, including AI. Uh, Recently, I'm not sure what the date is, in various reports by 972 magazine, which I recommend that people take a look at because it's one of the sort of bright lights in Israel's, I guess, new media, 972 magazine. It's a really good source to know what's happening in Israel and to seek an alternative narrative. Yuval Avraham exposed how Israel's military used artificial intelligence as a weapon to commit genocide and to commit like various sorts of attacks in Gaza. How's AI connected to this topic of mass delusion and information and disinformation? Before I mean, I have
There are
other
quite a
questions. I'll wait.
Yeah, yeah. There are quite a lot of AI experts around the world who keep saying that AI is a very dangerous tool and a very dangerous technology that could potentially be more dangerous than the nuclear weapons. And when they want to say in what way can AI threaten us, then it is actually by deceiving us, by manipulating us through giving us selective pieces of information and also false information, deep fake, all this stuff, which AI can do, especially in countries where they speak their own language and it's a smaller country, because then you can really create a whole narrative, a whole system of messaging. But the way that Yuval Avraham exposed the use of AI by the Israeli military is something else. He talked to a lot of intelligence officers, and they explained how Israel is generating targets. So there used to be a unit in the Israeli intelligence, which was called Unit 19, and it was a unit that generated targets mostly in Gaza, mainly by saying, okay, this is a person that we think is a Hamas fighter. We want to kill him. And then there's also the question of what is the number of civilians that is acceptable to kill alongside with this person by bombing this person. And Yuval Avraham exposed how this unit basically has been sidelined by artificial intelligence, and the artificial intelligence can create thousands. In fact, it was ordered by the Israeli intelligence to create 40,000 targets in Gaza, and then each target came with permission to kill up to 100 civilians. And if you do the math, 40,000 times 100, then you can see really the genocidal intent. And it's not coming from the AI; it's coming from the officers who designed this system to say we want to kill 100 people for every one of the 40,000 people who we consider to be Hamas fighters. So this is the first time in history that AI has been used as a weapon. All these officers spoke to Yuval Avraham, and they didn't say anything about how about if the social media sources that the AI is using when it's collecting the data in order to generate those targets by surveilling people's social media accounts, if the AI also is surveilling Israeli social media accounts. And I cannot prove if it does or it does not, but I strongly suspect that it does, because the Israeli social media accounts will not give the AI a lot of information, but it will give the AI a lot of justification to commit genocide. This gives the AI the power to come up with arguments why Palestinians in Gaza must be killed. Because this is what Israelis are constantly writing on social media, that calls for killing Palestinians and racist comments. So I think that Yuval Avraham Uh, I don't want to get too much into the details of these reports. I think it's very worthwhile to read the reports. But the main argument that those officers kept explaining to Yuval Avraham is just how compelling it is when the AI is giving the soldier a target, and the soldier has to make a decision whether he fires or not, artillery or a bomb or whatever, and the soldier has the right to interrogate the AI and ask, why do you think this is a valued target? What proof do you have? And the AI is supposed to answer all these questions. But they basically say, but the way that the AI talks to the soldiers just immediately cut the conversation short and open fire because the AI is so convincing. And I think Yuval Avraham just forgot to ask one very important analytical question in his reports. And this is what I want to talk to you about, because I think the reason that these intelligence officers have been so eager to speak with him, the reason that they were willing to go into details and expose Israel's use of AI in the war, is something that begs a question. Why are they so eager to do it? Why are they willing to share this secret information? And I think the answer is very apparent when we hear Professor Sebastian Ben Daniel, an Israeli um, professor who is also an activist that most people would consider him to be a pro-Palestinian activist, like even an anti-Zionist activist in the way that he speaks. But in fact, he very eagerly used those reports by Yuval Avraham and went on giving a lot of lectures and podcasts and things like this to say, yes, Israel is committing genocide, but it's the fault of the AI. The AI has tricked and manipulated the Israelis to commit genocide. And in fact, this is really a very dangerous argument. And I think this also explains why these intelligence officers wanted to speak to Yuval Avraham, because they wanted to clean their own conscience. They know that they've dropped bombs on civilian houses with 100 families, and killing so many innocent people. And they also know there is no process of verification, like there's no accountability process to say, oh, in this case maybe they targeted the wrong person, just somebody who happened to have the same name, for example, of some Hamas fighter they wanted to kill. When they don't do any verification, they will never know if they even killed the right person, and how many innocent lives were taken just because of this arbitrary decision. And in order to deal with this unbelievable emotional burden and feeling of guilt, they shift the blame to the AI. It's very similar to how they would like to shift the blame on Netanyahu. So we constantly see this interplay between disinformation, illusion, delusionment, and trying to shift the blame on something, whether it's Netanyahu or whether it's the AI.
Not thank you, not thank you at all. By the way, for people watching, there is a list of links that we have, because Shir provided those list of links that will accompany all the posts on Jadaliyya. A lot of these are in Hebrew. Some of them, a lot of them, depending on the episode, are also in English, including the things that we are actually mentioning now, because Shir is an awesome researcher and he made this easy for us. So I'm gonna ask you a question, last question, and this it's a little I mean, you're not in media. I mean, your work is not in media, but I'm gonna preface the question with a couple of comments. There's the question on it's on information. There's the question of the availability of information in the ether, the question of accessibility of the information, and there's which we didn't talk about this too much because that's not the main topic anyway, but there's also the question of the interpretive lenses through which any information goes through, right? Which complicates the question of accessibility. It's not just the problem of accessibility, as we can tell from living in the United States, for instance. So the question that I want to ask you, given these, I mean, these are my notes, if you say that, if one says, or if you say that Israelis are trapped in a bubble, in an ignorance bubble, um, does this imply that they are not accountable, that they have no responsibility for the crimes that Israel is committing, on the one hand, and then on the other hand, in uh, in the words or in the title of the book of Umar al-Aqad, in a way, one day everyone will have always been against this. Could Israelis at one point say that we did not know, and that's that? And if you can address the last comment I shared about the interpretive lenses, uh, couldn't people just reinterpret things the way they want, even after the subsiding of the genocide?
I mean, this is a question that haunts me, really haunts me, because it's true that I'm not exactly a media. I'm not exactly working as a journalist. I do sometimes write articles, but I'm trying to write a book, and the book that I'm writing is about the political economy of Israel's genocide, and I'm trying to ask the question: how is it possible? What makes this genocide possible? And of course, the disinformation makes it possible. I cannot just remove it from the book. I cannot just say that what makes the genocide possible is the weapons from the United States, because that's not enough. There are enough Israeli soldiers who are taking up those weapons, going into Gaza and murdering people, and they do it because there is some kind of narrative that convinces them that they should do it, and and are they just good people who have been manipulated by the government? And if I say this, something like this, morally speaking, this is inexcusable. This is really inexcusable. I mean, like as an Ashkenazi Jew, like most Ashkenazi Jews, most of my family was murdered in the Holocaust, and from when I went to primary school, there was always this question that every year the teachers were asking us, what do you think makes it possible for like the normal Germans to support genocide, to turn against their neighbors and accept this kind? And of course, the answer: oh, they were brainwashed, they were manipulated, they didn't know, they were convinced that the Jews were spreading disease and ruling the world and all that behind the scenes. These answers are not satisfactory. They all take away from the responsibility of the criminals for their crimes, and we cannot accept such answers. So this puts us in a very difficult moral position when we talk about it. I think the only way to really address this very difficult moral question is by taking a liminal position in which we understand that, and really based on this idea of the double colonial gaze, the double consciousness of the colonists, who are, they do know and they don't know. So do Israelis have access to the facts, to the truth? They had it all along. And even though I would say a large majority of Israelis are trying so hard to close their eyes and not to know what's happening, they still know. They cannot escape it. And with the knowledge comes, of course, responsibility and accountability. And I think that what we see now, especially in the last couple of weeks, but it has been building up also in the last half year or so, that more and more Israeli soldiers are committing suicide. There were over 300 soldiers that have tried to commit suicide in the past year or so. Not all of them succeeded, but this is only those who were recognized by the military as having tried to commit suicide, because there are a lot who commit suicide quite successfully, but it doesn't register this, because if you accidentally drop a grenade inside your bedroom, but the result is the same. And really the question is, and the levels of trauma and PTSD among Israeli soldiers and also among a lot of civilians is unbelievable. And I don't think we see this kind of PTSD response, or this, certainly not suicide, among Palestinians, victims of the Israeli genocide. Because the reason that people suffer this kind of cognitive dissonance and trauma is because their values clash with the reality. And if those soldiers tell themselves, I have to take revenge for what happened on October 7th, and the government told me that it's fine, and there is a strategy, and I'm just a soldier, and I should obey orders. And even if I have my doubts, but I don't want to leave my comrades alone in the unit, so I have to fight alongside them because of there's camaraderie in the unit. All of these excuses pile up and pile up and pile up. But after hundreds of days of killing and killing and killing in Gaza, at some point, the soldier realizes that now it's too late to stop. It's really a moment in which you can't just say, "Oh, sorry, I didn't know that there were children in this building," because it's already the building number 100 that you've blown up. And this is really where the truth comes out, and this is also proof. I think that Israelis know. And it's also for us as scholars and people who try to understand and to encompass this genocide, important to recognize that the responsibility is not something that can be ignored, and we cannot accept an excuse when people say they don't know. The system of manipulation and disinformation exists. It's very powerful and it's very necessary in order to commit the genocide. But the system only operates with the cooperation of the Israeli public, who is willingly going with this stream and willingly going along with the genocide in a very similar, disturbingly similar way to the way that the German society was willing to go along with genocide.
Um, Very quickly, sometimes I mean, it's really sickening. I mean, also intellectually so, stale when we see news items or arguments that basically say that what we're seeing in Palestine slash Gaza, I mean, it applies to both West Bank and Gaza, but what we're seeing in Gaza is fake. Or what we're seeing in Gaza is misreported because, like the story about the disgusting story with now the CBS head who basically addresses the starvation question as something that was also caused by other issues, not the blockade or things like that, or compounded by
Pre-existing diseases
pre-exist. Yeah,
of starving
unbelievable.
children. Yeah,
Yeah,
there's been so much about this in Israeli media.
yeah, and so those stories, like the compound of all these stories, is this also something that resembles what you said earlier about how people sort of cling on to what Netanyahu says, even though they might be opposed to him politically under different circumstances? Is this something that Israelis also believe, like wholehearted? Not Israelis, because there are very different sorts of levels and kinds and opinions and levels of support. But is this something that is ubiquitous and
It's an
resembles?
example. This example with the starving children allegedly or not allegedly suffering from pre-existing diseases is actually a very good example of how this system of disinformation collapses into itself. And there was a very famous case in Channel 14 of the Israeli television, which is a channel, which is a far right channel, very supportive of Netanyahu and just a propaganda channel. And they made a whole festival out of a picture of this mother and her daughter, and the daughter well, starved to death, and it's really an unbelievable, sad story. And they made a whole big deal of how this daughter actually had an illness before, and of course that makes her especially vulnerable to starvation. This is a simple uh, biological fact, and any sane person understand it. But they have used it as an excuse to say that Israel hasn't done anything wrong. But when they so eagerly jumped on this line of reasoning, for Barry Weiss, the head of CBS, she's not paying any price for the lies and vile racism that she spreads. But for the Israelis, who are living there and who are actually, part of this system, of course they're paying a price, because they start by saying, "Oh, actually, this is a, girl who starved to death had a pre-existing disease, so everything is fine." And then they started making jokes about maybe the mother is not thin enough. The mother doesn't look like she's starving, and maybe the mother ate the food of this girl, and maybe the mother ate her daughter, and those kind of jokes then were published on live television, and there was just a wave of Israelis who said, "Well, they're speaking like Nazis. There's no other way to describe it. These are Nazis. And how is it possible that some of us have become Nazis?" And this is a kind of discourse that I haven't seen in Israel before. When regular Israelis are saying, "Oh, there are Nazis among us," this is really a line that has been crossed. And I think this is really where this propaganda starts to collapse, because they've taken it too far, and now they cannot deny that there are starving children, right? And because of this, also at the demonstrations against the war, which started out as demonstrations only for the benefit of the Israeli hostages held in Gaza, and not for the other 2.3 million people in Gaza who also deserve to live. Um, After this incident, people started to bring pictures of starving Palestinian children to these demonstrations, and said, "Actually, what we are doing in Gaza is morally reprehensible and indefensible and has to stop." And in their thousands. So it's another crack in this system of propaganda, I think.
Amen. Okay, we're gonna let you go, but just tell us. I don't want to let you go actually, but I have to let you go because we had an agreement, and you're in Germany, and procedure and all that stuff, um, in good and bad ways, I guess. So there are many channels, but channels 12, 13, and 14 are prominent from what I understand, and channel 12 is the biggest. Can you just tell us just one thing about each channel so people can, because we hear channel 12, 13, 14, and maybe others. Can you just give
Yeah.
us a quick snippet as to what they are and what they represent and how big?
12 and 13 are very similar to each other. Both of them are corporate channels that make most of their income through commercials. Of course, they're very Zionists, and they invite pundits. A lot of these pundits are generals, right-wing people. So don't expect to find in these channels insights and a lot of humanity, unfortunately. But Channel 14 is something different. Channel 14 is really a propaganda channel, which is also a cult of personality around Netanyahu. It's not a corporate channel in the sense that it does have commercials, but its funding is really by political actors, and it makes Fox News seem like liberals. So it's really going very, very further away into the insane right wing. Calls for genocide are daily occurrences on Channel 14, or I would even say hourly occurrences. Um, but anyway, these are television channels, and I don't think that television is anyway a very good way for people to receive information. We could also have a long conversation about the different newspapers and radio channels and so on. But obviously, for Israelis who really want to get unfiltered information that is not subject to military censorship and to Zionist propaganda, all they need to do is just open some channels in English on their web browser, and it's so easy, and anyone can do it.
Thank you, Shir, so much for all of your work, insights, research. We look forward to your book. Um, and I understand that you must be yourself under a lot of pressure, precisely based on this point. And I'll leave everyone and leave you with this quick multiple choice questions, which students love, even though multiple choice questions are not easy, but they're just comforting. So when people that don't agree with you, and especially inside Israel, including as you shared some people that you know, friends, family, and so on, out of these four things that they say to you, which one is the most recurring? First, you don't have the information. That's why you're saying these things. Second, you're misinterpreting the information. Basically, your analytical lenses are problematic, uh, and your analysis is problematic. Third, that you're anti-Semitic or something of along these lines. You know, just to cut down the conversation. Um, Actually, I don't think I have a fourth one. I mixed, I combined two and three together. What do you hear more when you say the things you're saying from friends, family, and people that you know that support Israel or that are inside Israel?
Well, this has changed with the genocide because I've had thousands of hours of arguments before I left Israel, even, and usually people would start by saying, "You don't have the fact. You're wrong." When I give them the facts and prove the facts, because it's not so hard to prove them, they say, "Oh, I didn't know." And then when I ask them, "Okay, now you know, what are you going to do about it?" Then they say, "Oh, actually, I did know all along, but whose side are you on anyway?" This is how the conversation is used to go. I think now it's different. Now it's only the number one on your list, so you don't have the right information, and you're completely wrong. But if I respond in any way, the conversation stops immediately because of tremendous fear, and I can understand the fear, and I have actually some human understanding to what it means, because I told one of my family members, if you're right and I'm wrong, and actually everyone in Gaza is living a good life and there is no genocide, I would be so happy. I would be so happy to be proven wrong on this point. But if I'm right and you're wrong, and you find out that you've supported these atrocities, how will you live with yourself? And at that moment, the conversation stopped.
Well, obviously, Shir, you don't have the information, or maybe you should go learn Hebrew or something. Um, Shukran, thank you, Shir, very much. Thanks to everyone who's watching and who's followed this series. Shir is also putting together a number of essays, one for each of the episodes, that involves more in depth coverage sometimes or analysis, as well as resources, citations, documentation, which is really good if if you would like to pursue this further research wise or otherwise. And these will be published on Jadaliyya. If people don't know what Jadaliyya is, if you look at wherever you're watching, it's up there. It's Jadaliyya. And for the love of whatever you're into, it's not Jadaliyya, it's Jadaliyya. All right. Shukran. Thank you, Shir. And hopefully we'll see you again. We will definitely reach out to you. I know a lot of people are going to reach out to you, still reach out to me asking about you after watching. And when it's fair and, you know, safe, I share information. Thank you, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Bassam.
All right. Wow, this is awesome, Habibi. This is really wonderful. I'm glad I asked you some of the extra questions. This last question, I really it meant a lot to me, like what people tell you. And we never
Yeah.
talked about other things. So I guess 5 episodes was not too much.
No, it's not too much. It's intentionally. The point is to give a nugget of information that people can process, and then they
Yeah,
will be
absolutely. And
encouraged to also read the essay.
you're a genius for limiting me to 25 minutes, because if we didn't do this, this would be an hour and a half every time. Okay, well,